Good morning. I would like to welcome you to the commencement ceremony for the class of 1992 at the University of Georgia School of Law. I'm sure that many of you who have a spouse, a child, or a friend who is graduating today feel you also have survived 3 years of law school and should be receiving your diploma today. Although you will not be walking across this stage, you should feel confident that your support has helped these graduates reach their goal of receiving their Juris Doctorate. Before I introduce the next speaker, I have one more thing to mention. As many of you may or may not be aware, quite a few of my classmates do not have a job waiting for them after graduation. So, if there is anyone here today who is interested in hiring extremely bright, hardworking, very recent law school graduates, you can contact Mr. Brent Routman in the Placement Center. His phone number is 404-542-7541. Operators are waiting for your calls. Now I would like to introduce the next speaker, Mr. Julius M Halsey, who is currently the president of the Law School Alumni Association. Mr. Halsey was born in Hall County, Georgia, and graduated from the University of Georgia School of Law in 1963. He is a named partner in the firm Halsey, Oliver & Mahar in Gainesville, Georgia, and he also serves as Special Assistant Attorney General for the state of Georgia. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Julius Halsey.
Mr. Ralph Nader, President Knapp, Ellington, Class President Stephanie Stuckey, Class Vice President Kelly Hollis, Graduate Legal Studies Director Frederick Husak, School of Law Marshal Dr. Mark Galvin, Honorary Marshals Professors Larry Blunt and Rebecca White, Athens Clark County Sheriff Jerry L. Massey, distinguished faculty, Master of Laws candidates, Juris Doctor candidates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the University of Georgia School of Law Alumni Association, it is indeed a privilege for me to extend greetings and congratulations to you, the graduating class of 1992, and to your families and friends. You're embarking on a journey of what will surely become exciting and successful careers. This day represents the culmination of many years of rigorous scholastic preparation, and you're now ready to put your acquired learning and skills to the test. Remembering that the first graduation of this law school was in 1860, you are the 132nd class to graduate. All of us take great pride in the law school and the progress that has been made in enhancing its quality and reputation. This progress would not have been possible without the countless contributions of alumni over the years. As Dean Ellington recently observed, we all drink water from wells someone else dug. Private support gives the law school the margin of excellence that we must have to compete with all the other very fine law schools. You, the class of 1992, will soon begin your professional careers just as distinguished alumni before you have done over the years. Despite the passage of time, you have a common bond. You join them today not only as graduates of the University of Georgia School of Law, but also as members of the Law School Alumni Association, which represents all living alumni. The association, composed of over 5,600 members, is the organized alumni vehicle through which you will be able to keep in touch and involved with this law school. Like those who have preceded you, I am confident that you will continue the 132 years of tradition of caring deeply about the status and the relevance of this great institution. We're all clothed with a responsibility of preserving and enhancing academic excellence at the University Law School. The class of 1942 observes its 50th reunion this year. Professor Werner Chafin is a member of that class. 50 years from now, some of you who graduate today will probably be present to congratulate the class of 2042. Perhaps you will remember May 16, 1992, and recall it as the day you were first greeted as alumni of this law school. Today you become a part of an ongoing tradition of which you can be extremely proud. And I congratulate you and welcome you into that tradition. May the years to come be kind, and may each of you be blessed with good health, success, and happiness. I now recognize your class president, Stephanie Stuckey.
Before I introduce our graduation speaker, I would like to make a special presentation on behalf of the graduating class. If Dean Ellington could please join me and Julius Halsey at the podium. This year, we have established the first ever pledge support program as an entire class. Individual members of our class have made donations to the law school totaling up to $3,100, and I would like to present this check. I would like to present this check to the School of Law on behalf of the class of 1992. It is both a pleasure and an honor today to introduce our graduation speaker. The name Ralph Nader is synonymous with consumer advocacy, but he is much more than that. Mr. Nader is also a lawyer, political activist, best-selling author, Saturday Night Live host, a none-of-the-above presidential candidate, and a full-time citizen. Mr. Nader graduated magna cum laude from Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs in 1955. He went on to Harvard Law School, where he earned his LLB with distinction and served as editor of the Harvard Law Record. He began practicing law in 1959 in Hartford, Connecticut. In 1966, Ralph Nader began his one-man crusade against the nation's car makers, insisting on mandatory safety belts in American cars. As a result of Mr. Nader's book, Unsafe at Any Speed, and his testimony before congressional committees, the historic Traffic Safety Act of 1966 was passed. Overnight, Ralph Nader became what has been described as a real-life Frank Capra hero, a latter-day Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Thanks to his almost single-handed efforts, an estimated 200,000 lives have been saved on our nation's highways. In 1972, Charles McCrary published a book entitled Citizen Nader. In it, he said of Nader, "He likes to say of himself that he has the gift of outrage. At any time, on any given day, some aspect of American life may sting his conscience. Once stung, he attacks immediately, with no particular forethought. If this method sometimes cheats him of results, it also gives him the element of surprise, for he is usually over the breastwork and out of the back door of the fort before his enemies ever realize there is no army behind him." During the 70s, however, Mr. Nader formed a task force of 300 idealistic young attorneys and recent graduates. Dubbed Nader's Raiders, the Citizen Action Team fought for a series of progressive legislative reforms. The Raiders have helped to enact at least 200 new laws and government agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, auto safety legislation, insurance rate rollbacks, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. Mr. Nader's group also launched government investigations into such diverse areas as food additives, the nuclear power industry, the Educational Testing Service, dangerous drugs, the U.S. Postal Service, and environmental hazards. In the past decade, Mr. Nader's reputation as national gadfly has continued to grow. He drummed up enough voter protests to defeat the congressional pay raise issue. His continued efforts on behalf of insurance reform helped to ensure the passage of California's Proposition 103. And now, after nearly 20 years of tireless dedication, airbags have become a standard feature of many American-made cars. Mr. Nader's most recent target for reform has been the U.S. political system. His supporters are promoting Mr. Nader as a none-of-the-above write-in candidate for president. Despite his assertion that he is not running as an official candidate, Mr. Nader has managed to garner over 6,300 votes in the New Hampshire primary and came out ahead of Governor Robert Kerry and Senator Tom Harkin in the Massachusetts primary. Today, May 16, 1992, 20 years after the publication of Citizen Nader, it can be said that there is an army behind Ralph Nader, and he's here to recruit you for a better America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And President Knapp, Dean Ellington, friends, parents, long-suffering parents, members of the class of 92, thank you for the invitation. There's a bit of irony in this invitation, is that when Stephanie was a very small infant, her father was a congressman in Washington, and we clashed over the airbag. And now as his daughter is introducing me, and the airbag is finally coming into cars. I was very pleased to hear from her father today that he supports airbags. I'm not going to say his daughter had anything to do with that. This is a beautiful setting and a very joyous occasion. Certainly for the graduates who put in 4, 8, 12, 15 years of work, not counting kindergarten, and even more for the LLM degree recipients. They're now about to be lawyers. In just a few minutes, they will all be lawyers, at least the JD degree recipients. They won't be attorneys for a few more weeks or maybe a few more days until they pass the bar. There is a distinction between being a lawyer and an attorney. It's a distinction that's not discussed very much in law school, which is supposed to discuss all conceivable distinctions. An attorney is a person who attorneys, represents the client. A lawyer is very often an attorney, but something more. Lawyer has a broader horizon. A lawyer's role is not simply to represent a paying client. A lawyer's role is to look out for the system of justice, try to improve the rule of law, to embrace all claimants for its benefit, and try to tame the all too often rule of unbridled power. In our country, lawyers have a much broader role than in most other countries. They are one of the few professions who can be generalists in a sea of specialization. So many professions are so specialized that they tend to escape responsibility for the consequences of their knowledge and action in the broader public policy field, on the grounds that that's just not their area of expertise. But the law and the legal profession is the great catalytic profession. At its best, it can weave the inputs of other professions, science, engineering, medicine, statistics, into policy making, decision making for a better life for all. But as you know, the legal profession is also the subject of a lot of pillory, if not ridicule. Lawyers don't come out very well on public opinion polls. Part of this, of course, is well-deserved. There are too many lawyers who don't think highly enough of their calling. Some of them disgrace the profession. Some of them operate too narrowly within the profession. Some of them primarily represent the rich and the powerful. And many of them don't represent the people who have no voice, the interests that have no voice, the interests in a prosperous and well-distributed economic system. So we don't have 35, 40 million people in this country living in dire poverty, many of them children. Interests in a non-violent environment, from the macro problems of dealing with the greenhouse effect, ozone depletion, and the rest, to the micro problems of workplace, indoor, outdoor pollution in the communities. These are interests that often don't have voice. It's not just people who are poor or people in the middle class who can't afford a lawyer. It's broader public interests that don't have a cutting-edge voice in the legal arena. And these interests have been growing as our country becomes more complex, as society, economy becomes more intricate. There are an increasing number of interests now that deserve voice, deserve right, deserve remedy, deserve participation. Who represents our right, collective right to privacy? Vis-a-vis credit card companies, vis-a-vis credit bureaus, and what's used in terms of our personal data files. And who represents our right to hold bureaucracies accountable so government can deliver? You ever hear those words recently? Government can deliver? It's becoming a memory. And who's going to deal with the corporate crime epidemic? Not just the S&Ls, but a whole range of corrosive and arrogant violations of law by powerful economic interests, often chronicled in the Wall Street Journal, apart from the editorial page. And who's going to deal with posterity? The framers of the Constitution always talked about posterity. You look at Jefferson, Madison, other addresses, they always talked about posterity. They were concerned about the future. I find it very difficult to locate that word in the speeches of contemporary politicians. We are doing something for posterity, however. We're burdening it. We're burdening posterity with awesome debts, with awesome pollution, awesome obligations which we should have taken care of in our generation. So what do we do about all this? The great thing about this country is there's a great deal that can be done. Doesn't mean it is done. A great deal that can be done. Under the Constitution, the science, the technology, the wealth, intelligence of the people. Reaching out from the distant past, an ancient Chinese philosopher once said, "To know and not to act is not to know." We can add to that. The members of our profession can say, to know and to be able to act and not to act is not to be true to our profession. The graduates have about 500 months before they're 65. 500 months. See how fast May is going? What are they going to do with that 500 months? Some of them say, we got 600 months. We're going to go into our 70s. All right. What level of horizon you come out of in law school will often determine what you're going to accomplish. This is not to say that in mid-career you can't have a turnaround, or in late career you can't decide to do something quite different. But it does help to leave law school with a higher horizon, unencumbered by the prospect of all your time being controlled by what might be called retainer astigmatism, by the retainer that walks in your office. You need to be both attorneys and lawyers, and the two are not the same. They overlap, but they're not the same. What is your mission as a lawyer? Lawyers in the past have been institution builders at best. Our civil liberties are better today because of the American Civil Liberties Union. However irritating some of their litigation may be to certain people, they have one cardinal principle. All their victories for civil liberties, the people who developed them were not all lawyers, but some of them were. Now, those lawyers could have said they're too busy to start the ACLU. They're too busy to start the NAACP. They've got clients to worry about. And indeed, they could have spent all their time as attorneys representing clients properly. But they decided to spend some of their time as lawyers. And those two institutions are only two of many institutions which have been started by members of our profession. Not all of them legal institutions. Many social service institutions in the cities. The architects of the populist progressive movement in our country were not all farmers. Most of them were. Many of the changes that we see for the better in this country often rest on architecture designed by lawyers, arms control agreements, reformations in consumer law that affect all of us and what we buy, designed by lawyers, not attorneys, lawyers. Legislation to protect the integrity of human beings, physically and democratically, designed by lawyers. There's the other side of the profession that's not very tasteful, of course, and we don't need to put a taint on this beautiful day by recounting their misdeeds. They also design things so that powerful interests can get away with things that they shouldn't. What's important, I think, to note is that our law schools are so intent on developing legal skills for the students, and the faculty believes so fervently that the students are most interested in bread and butter law for the bar and for the job after graduation, that they tend to shortchange themselves in terms of displaying before students the legal history of the profession at its best, so that the models and the emulation factor can go to work on their imaginations and their quest. Now, sooner or later, the canons of ethics and the thirst for justice gets to lawyers, even lawyers who are very much indentured to wealthy clients. Last August in Atlanta at the American Bar Association American Bar Association Convention, the headlines went to Vice President Quayle because he had just discovered his principal mission as Vice President outside the Senate, which is decry the level of litigation, the proliferation of lawyers, in a speech that was graced, or shall we say disgraced, with about 25 factual errors. Then he got into an altercation with the president of the ABA, and the press was off and running. That theme of excessive litigation and its corollary, which is to reduce the rights of people, particularly injured and sick people, to have their day in court against the perpetrators of their harm, has become a common theme of what is called lawyer bashing. But it really is victim bashing, with lawyers being used as a decoy because of their reputed low ranking in the public opinion polls. The press covered Mr. Quayle's speech and the subsequent exchanged with the president of the ABA extensively. What they didn't cover was another remarkable speech that was made by Associate Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. She delivered an address on the legal needs of the poor. And it quite properly, in my judgment, goes down as one of the 3 or 4 best legal addresses I've ever read on that subject. She started out by saying that only 12% of impecunious people in this country who need lawyers for their desperately serious problems have access to lawyers. That's another way of saying that legal services for the poor, with their 4,000 lawyers, is very inadequate. By the way, legal services for the poor was an idea conceived in its particularity by 2 graduates of Yale Law School before they graduated from Yale Law School in 1964. Edgar and Jean Kahn, husband and wife. They wrote an article in the Yale Law Journal, and then they went right to Washington, and they persuaded the ABA and others to support a bill to enact a legal services corporation to provide legal services for the poor. And it succeeded. It's not enough. And Associate Justice O'Connor went on to say that there are people living in the streets, there are children who are hungry, there are people who've been evicted from their apartments, there are people who have been harmed in a variety of ways because they can't afford a lawyer. Put it in just that clear and simple human terms. I suppose what she was saying was that a good part of the pursuit of happiness in our country is the pursuit of justice. And that's not just a general observation that tends to be true in most societies. Where you have very low levels of justice, you don't usually have very high levels of happiness. But it's also true as a personal formula for happiness in life. That if in your professional work you like the monetary rewards but you don't like the work, you're bored by the work, you find it tedious, you don't find it important, you're not pursuing happiness, possibly because you're not pursuing justice. And too many young lawyers under 35 are filling out public opinion polls saying that they're not happy with their work. They're bored with their work. They'd rather be doing other kinds of legal work. So it seems to me that one of your missions in life is to find a way to divide your time so as a minimum you can provide pro bono activity as part of your law firm work, but as a maximum you can become institution builders. You can become leaders in your catalytic function to liberate the energies and the long suppressed crusades of many Americans for achievement. Because above all, when you get out of law school, you probably have a more tender understanding and a more realistic understanding of what power is and the relation between law and power. And law must always civilize power, discipline power, hold it accountable. Private power, public power. Wall Street, Washington. State capitals. The local paper mill. The local city council. The local bully. For you to involve yourself in this activity, it's very good to think for yourself, not leave it up to the senior partners entirely. Because a new generation of energy is required. One came up in the 60s in the law. I think it did a lot of good things. Tended to decline in the 80s. Using one of Jimmy Carter's words, a malaise spread over the profession. There was discouragement. There was a sense that not enough was being done. Bureaucracy was reigning over law. Corporate power was reigning over law. The streets were out of control. People losing control over their lives, their streets, their children, their jobs, their government, their taxes. Not a very good decade, the 80s, except for a few, for whom it was a very good decade. Possibly not retrospectively, but while it was going on. Now we have another decade. The 30s, the 60s, the 90s. Will the 90s be a decade of awareness and commitment? I see signs where that's happening, but there's no point predicting it. I want to make it happen. My alumni class at Princeton has organized a Center for Civic Leadership, funded and run by the classmates at Princeton University, to network our long suppressed ideas for change and to provide internships and full-time positions in social change organizations for Princeton undergraduates and when they graduate. We're trying to get alumni classes all over the country to realize that the alumni class is a dormant institution in many of its potentials and that it can organize without any particular fanfare or posturing to become a really powerful force locally, regionally, or nationally. My classmates are not exactly street smart radicals. Many of them are presidents, vice presidents of corporations, senior partners of law firms, doctors heading clinics, professors. They all seem to come to a realization that they grew up in the 50s when America was number one, there was no number two, and they spent the time furthering their careers. And now their children are grown, and they have financial security, and they're asking, what's happening to our country? And what are we doing about it? And what should we do about it? It's nice to realize this in your mid-50s. It's better to realize it in your 20s. Because, sad as it may be, the greatest breakthroughs in progress in our country usually come from the young. That should not be an iron rule, however. But that's true in science, it's true in mathematics, it's often true in business, and it's quite true in the law. Not necessarily the achievements, but the creative breakthroughs that lay the groundwork for the achievements. So look at these years in your 20s and 30s, not simply as years of incubation as you clamber up the ladder of your profession. Look at them as priceless years never to be recovered for the exercise of your imagination, to make the law work, to make it equitable, to make it grow, to make it liberate, to make it fair, to make it produce its promise. In that regard, I'd like to discuss briefly a concrete proposal that would apply here in Georgia. Some 17 years ago, I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and in the backyard of a lawyer with very nice grapefruit trees and ripened grapefruit falling onto the ground, we had a little meeting of young lawyers, mostly in their 30s. And the meeting was how to establish an institution in Arizona that would deal with the law writ large and that would deal with improving the law in ways that commercial practice and legal aid could not do. And so was born the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest, supported eventually by mainstream members of the Arizona Bar and supported by a dues checkoff on the Bar Association and supported by private foundations and some attorney fee statutes which were taken into account. Now the Arizona Center for Law and the Public Interest is an institution in Arizona of considerable significance. At its 15th anniversary, to which I was invited, a number of veteran corporate lawyers came up to me and said, of all the things they did in their life, professional life, being part of the Arizona Center was the most rewarding. This is a nonprofit law firm. No fees for retainers. This center has won several Supreme Court cases, including the Norris decision, which rejected gender-based pension discrimination. It has taken civil rights, environmental, consumer, labor, and other cases of major political and public significance, and won. It provides a source of security for some people in Arizona, that there's someone looking out for them. There's someone looking out for justice, regardless of ability to pay. This is not legal aid. This is not charity. This is litigation for change. And this is their annual report. This is their 15-year report. And in the introduction to the report, the president, David Bodney, stated, whether in victory or defeat, the center first should be measured by its devoted and tireless staff. These are men and women of public interest law in this state who have built not only upon the earlier successes of civil rights and legal aid lawyers, but who have cleared new paths for a broad range of otherwise powerless people. In truth, the center's lawyers have represented for the past 15 years the neglected interests that affect us all, whether as consumers, workers, individuals, crying out for a clean environment. And the center is its clients, and the looks on their faces when their voices are heard, when they sense a stake in the system, when they prevail against all odds, these are the persons who sacrifice our complacency and dare to advance the law in the name of the public's interest. But perhaps more basically, the center should be assessed in terms of its commitment to improve our legal process. As Justice Thurgood Marshall said, of public interest lawyers generally, these attorneys, quote, have broadened the flow of information to decision makers. They've made it possible for administrators and legislators and judges to assess the impact of their decisions in terms of all affected interests. And by helping open doors to our legal system, they have moved us a little closer to the ideal of equal justice for all. What's interesting about the center is that no other state has emulated it. No other bar has rallied to set a similar institution up. Except that is what's going on here in Georgia. And a number of widely diverse lawyers here in Georgia have been speaking with one another and saying, we need a Georgia center for the law in the public interest. And indeed you do, as every state does. And in this effort, here in the audience, there are people who have been meeting to establish such a center. Attorney Ogden Doremus, Attorney Doug Haynes, some major leaders of the corporate bar have expressed interest, some professors of law. Establishing such a center with an office here in Athens will give an admirable expansion to the clinical experience for law students who follow you, as well as for the lawyers who are now practicing, who can surround this center with a circle of pro bono work. To know and to be able to act and not to act is not to know. Today, there are people here who know, who are able to act and who will act. After the proceedings, we hope any of you who are interested in becoming the founders of the Georgia Center for Law and the Public Interest with your colleague lawyers here in Georgia. There will be a meeting at the Chile Room at the law school. I think it's on the second floor after the graduation proceedings. And perhaps 50 years from now, apropos our previous speaker, there will be people who look back at the grand achievements of such a center and say it started here on one beautiful May morning with the class of '92 and their parents, friends, relatives, and faculty. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm glad we have this beautiful occasion to celebrate this graduation ceremony. Let me explain what will happen next. In just another minute, President Knapp will ask the candidates for the Juris Doctor degree to stand and will confer your degrees. Then faculty marshals, Professor Rebecca White and Professor Larry Blunt, chosen by vote of the class, will come to the microphone and read your names. As your name is called, please come forward to be individually recognized and congratulated by Mr. Nader, President Knapp, and me. Photographs are welcome. There's space up front for you to come, and this is an occasion for family and friends to celebrate with the graduates, and we welcome you to come forward and make a photograph, and the graduates will come behind the podium around this way, so if you want to come down, they come alphabetically so you can get a family keepsake. After the JD candidates have been individually recognized, Dr. Frederick Huzzack will introduce the candidate for the Master of Laws degree, whose degrees will be conferred officially by the graduate school in the June commencement. If your names are called, we'll ask you also to come forward to be individually congratulated and recognized. Today marks a significant stage in your lives. It brings to a close your days as law students, when 3 years ago you took those first steps toward becoming a member of the legal profession. I hope for you that this school has been a place where you've been challenged to give your best effort and thereby to grow and gain in confidence about what you can accomplish. I'm sure that you've experienced both great joy and happiness, as well as some disappointments and frustration. I'm also sure that you've made friends for life and have created your own legends. It's been here in this place that you started your life's work. I remind you that you're entering a great profession, one that has behind it a millennium of history. And that is quite something, to be a part of the great march of history. I remind you that you've been trained for the public profession of the law. In your lives, you will often be asked by others, what should I do? You'll be expected to see relevancies beyond the immediate situation and to give wise direction to the affairs of your clients and to help preserve those wise constraints that keep us free. As lawyers, I remind you that you owe an obligation to pursue your calling in the spirit of public service. These are the obligations of a profession that will set you apart. You have a special opportunity to lead fulfilling lives, to make a positive difference in the lives of other citizens and to this republic. I wish you every success. It's now my pleasure to call on the President of the University of Georgia, Dr. Charles B. Knapp, to confer your degrees. Mr. President, on behalf of the law faculty, I proudly present the candidates for the degree Juris Doctor. Thank you. Mr. President, on behalf of the law faculty, I proudly present the candidates for the degree Juris Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Ellington. and on behalf of the University of Georgia, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the campus for this special event. Graduation from the School of Law at the University of Georgia is a significant achievement. The school, through the accomplishments of its faculty, its alumni, and its students, has been established as one of the finest in this nation. You may state with justifiable pride that you are a University of Georgia law graduate, and I urge you in the years to come to maintain that pride in your profession, to remain loyal to this school and to this university, and to support it with your time and personal resources. I said that the School of Law enjoys excellence because of its faculty, students, and alumni. And certainly these groups have been integral to the success of this outstanding law program. An additional ingredient for excellence, however, is the level of leadership provided by your dean. If there is one bittersweet note this morning, it is that Dean Ellington has announced that he will step down as dean in June of 1993. His term as the leader of the Lumpkin School of Law has coincided with my years as president of the university. And all of us have been delighted with his steady administrative style and his vision for the future of the school. By every measure, Ron, you can be proud of your accomplishments. In terms of the ever-increasing quality of students, the caliber and contributions of the faculty, and the outstanding support from your alumni, your work as dean has been exemplary. This year, for example, you sent a student moot court team off for a national competition, and it returned with the national championship. In addition, you presided over the groundbreaking for an important new addition to the school, which will house the Rusk Center for International Law. Thank you, Ron, for your hard work and for the many contributions you have made to the academic excellence of the University of Georgia. And to you, the graduates, you are tomorrow's advocates, prosecutors, defenders, and public policy makers. As officers of the court, you will have the task of protecting and defending our system of democracy under the Constitution of the United States. I wish you well in these important endeavors. Today you should reflect on the time and the effort that you've expended in earning this degree. You've endured long and exhausting hours in the library, in the classroom, and in study sessions. By successfully completing your coursework and participating in today's ceremony, you've demonstrated your strong commitment to the University School of Law and to your chosen profession. We all share pride in your accomplishment, and I wish you success and Godspeed. Congratulations. And now, would the candidates for Juris Doctor please stand? By the authority vested in me as President of the University of Georgia by the Board of Regents, I now confer upon you and give you the degree for which you have been recommended by your dean and the faculty, with all the rights and privileges appertaining thereto. Congratulations.
Dean Ellington, President Knapp, Mr. Nader, I'd now like to introduce to you the members of the 1992 class LLM for the LLM degree.
parents and friends are invited to join the new graduates of the law school at a reception behind us. I would ask that you remain in your seats during the processional so that the graduating students can again march down the center aisle, and once they have left this area, then please join us in the rear of the auditorium. With that, the program is about to conclude.